Hey, hello all. It's been quite a while since I did a video blog, um, and I just was thinking that this blog, what I wanted to share, was going to be a little bit easier to share in person. I started to write it, and it was just like, okay, not going to be able to get this down. So, as you just probably read earlier, I was at spring conference this year, and no, I did not fall again on the logboard, as you read. I'm quite thankful for that. But as I was sharing, one of the things that I was really learning, again, is to be continually dying to self each day. And last year, I prayed that God would do something radical in my life to continue to draw me to Him, to just give me a passion for Him. And I kind of fell on the longboard, and you guys have all heard that story and how that impacted my life and how I've grown because of that. This year, I asked that again because I just want to keep growing. I want to be more and more like Christ's Son each and every day, and so after conference, there was a couple of the other singles in JV that are around my age. We decided to go to Prague, which sounds really kind of prestigious, but it's like, just pretty close here. So we're like, hey, let's go for 2 days to Prague. So we finish conference, we get on the road, then we have to go back because one of the girls forgot her pillows, and we like go back, we keep going, we stop for dinner, we take a long time at dinner, and like basically we get into Prague really late. And so I'm thinking like, okay, we just had a conference, I'm ready to go to bed. So we get to the hotel, and we're like, okay, we can't park here. We need to go find some parking. Two guys that know Prague really well, they say, okay, let's go over here to these free parking lots. So we go there. They're closed. We're driving around town, and I'm just like, oh man, I'm so tired. Come on, let's find a parking spot. Let's go to bed now. And so we find a parking spot, and it's way across town. And so we get out, and then one of the group was like, hey, let's go out somewhere. So it's like, everybody's like, oh, okay. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, like, oh, I'm really thinking like bed sounds really good right now. Being introverted and all, being around people all week, I was kind of like, oh, okay, well, I'm ready to like have just one night. Let's go sleep. Let's not be getting up early and all that kind of stuff. So, um, yeah, so we get out, and I was like, duh, I just don't want to do this. And then in the back of my head, God's saying, hey, come on, remember you said you're going to die to self, which sounds funny because I was like, I don't know. I don't know if this is like dying to self, God. Like, this is just kind of like, I'm not going out to serve you. I'm just, like going out with some friends. That's not really a big deal. Well, anyways, I decided, okay, fine. I'll die to self. Let's go. So we go along, and everything's closed. It's Sunday night. Sunday night in Europe, everything's closed. Well, we find this hostel that we used to stay at with JV people, and so we go in, and we see one guy up on the stage. He's playing a live musician. He looks like the crazy brother of one of our friends, and so we're like, oh, it's hilarious, and we're laughing. And anyways, we go find a booth kind of off in a corner, and one of the guys in our group, John, he decides like, okay, I'm gonna go up and order something. So he goes. And while he's up there, he thinks, oh, I should go take a picture of this guy and like send him to our friend, like, hey, it's your crazy brother. So he goes up there, and he's taking a picture of this guy, and this other guy walks up to him, and my friend John has this huge beard, and this other guy comes up, and he's like, man, you have a effing cool beard, and John was like, oh, hey, thanks, not knowing what to say to that, and the guy's like, what are you doing here and stuff? And he's like, oh, I live in the Czech Republic. And the guy's like, oh, cool, I live in Russia. I'm actually from Florida. And so they start talking, and he's like, hey, I can tell you like how you should learn language and stuff, and that like Americans are just not working. They're just like, oh, I'm trying to learn the language, but they don't actually try. And he's like, can I give you some tips? And my friend John's like, yeah, of course. I just moved here, and I'm trying to learn the language. And so they go off, and they're like, this guy's talking to him and stuff, and we're sitting there like, oh, John made a new friend. He's always making friends places. And then he brings him over to the table with us. And so we're sitting there around the table, and this guy sits down, and he starts talking to us, And then he's like, going around the table. He's like, "Oh, so you guys are all from Czech Republic?" And we're like, "No, no, we're from 3 different countries actually." And the 2 girls were from Slovenia, and 2 of the other guys were from Czech, or serving in Czech Republic. And I said Slovakia. And then there was this whole spiel about how sexy the girls are in Slovakia, and like, "Oh, are you getting some of that?" And I was like, "No, I don't really do that." And he's like, "Oh, well, why not?" And I said, "Well, I have something else in my life that means more to me, and it's like, it gives me satisfaction, and I don't have to like seek for it in other places." And so, so he's like, "Oh, that's strange." And I was like, "Well, if you understood, it's really not that strange." And well, he goes, "Oh, okay, never mind. So why are you guys here?" And we're like, "Well, we're missionaries." And he's like, "Oh, so like Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons or something?" And we're like, "No, no, we're Christians." And he's like, "Oh, okay." And like, it's crazy. Like, what do you believe? And so we start telling him, and he's like, "Yeah, yeah, I believe like in the golden rule, do good for others and that kind of stuff." I'm like, "Well, actually, it's like so much easier than that. Like, it's actually free. Like, you can get into heaven. You can have a relationship with Christ, with God, for free." And he was like, "That's strange. What do you mean?" So we start to share with him, and long story short, we end up sitting with this guy for like 2.5 hours. It's like almost 2:45 in the morning, and this guy's asking question after question, and we're answering them, and it's really sweet because like every time he had a question, one of us had some life circumstance that really like connected with that question, and that we were really able to answer in like a personal way, not just like, this is what the answer is, but like really like, yeah, my life, this is how it impacted me. So finally we get to one point, and we were thinking like, oh man, he's probably uh, like probably getting tired of talking about God and everything. And so we changed the subject, like, "Oh, so like you're in Moscow. What's something interesting to see in Moscow? Like what should I do there if I went there?" And he was like, yeah, you wouldn't want to go there." Like, "Oh, well, why not?" He's like, "Well, you just, it's just sin. It's just sin there." And my friend Gwen goes, "Well, that's exactly where I'd want to be." He's like, "What? You guys are Christians. Like, you like in the church and you don't want to do stuff." And like, "No, like that's where Christ called us to be. Like, we should be in the world. Like, where there's sin, that's where Christ is needed. So like that's where we want to be." He's like, "That's really strange. That's like totally different than most Christians." And we're like, "Well, we would argue that what you're saying, maybe they're not Christians, or maybe they just really don't understand what Christ is calling them to." And so we're like, "Well, what do you like about Moscow?" And he's like, "Well, I like the sin." We're like, "Wow, that's pretty honest." He's sitting here with 5 missionaries. He's like, "Yeah, I like the sin." Um, and so we're like, "Oh, okay." And so then we share the gospel again with them, and it's really fascinating because he's just completely open to it. He's not totally getting it, but he's like really open to it. And so it comes around 2:45, and he's like, "You guys are probably tired. Let's try to meet tomorrow." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, we'd love to meet tomorrow. Like, what time?" And he's like, "Well, I'm with my friends all day, so maybe for dinner." And we're like, "Yeah, let's do dinner together. Like, And he's like, "Okay, here's my number," and gave us his number, which is crazy because usually when you meet somebody like that, they like you give them your number and expect them to call you. But he was like, "Hey, y'all, I'll give you my number and you can call me." So we go out of the hostel and we're like walking back to our place. And it's like 25-minute walk, and we just like burst into this like praise and worship time. We're just praying and we're like worshiping God, and just like, wow, that was crazy. Like, we're just like going out to hang out, and we just meet this guy and have this huge conversation with him, and just like God was so present. There's even stuff in the background that I haven't even told you, like just leading up to this time. We weren't even supposed to go to Prague. We were going to go to somewhere else for vacation, and just it worked out that we ended up going there. And so we're just walking and just like praising God, and just really excited. And the funny thing was, we were just talking about some new countries that we wanted to add to JV, and we're like, "Oh, like maybe Russia was put in there." And we're like, "Yeah." And so we meet a guy named Peter who lives in Russia, and like it just dawned on 3 of us at once. Like, that's kind of interesting. It's like Peter in the Bible, and like, is there something there? Like, that's kind of crazy, God, that we were just talking today about like expanding JV to other countries and possibly Russia. And who knows what's going to happen with that. So we got back to our hostel and we're like sitting up. We couldn't go to sleep. We were just like so excited. And so we just stay there. We're just praying for him. We're praying for the country of Russia. We're praying for Czech, for Slovakia, Slovenia, for just praying for revival and just like crying, worshiping God. It was so powerful. It was just like one of the coolest things that I've experienced in a long time, and just totally spontaneous, just like out of nowhere. And actually, the next morning we get up and we're gonna go around town, and my friend, he's like, I feel like I have like a Holy Spirit hangover this morning. I'm just like so pumped and so excited. I was like, yeah, I know. So we go out around Prague, and we come to one point. One Czech friend joins us, Anna, and she's with us, and two of the girls they go to look in one of the clothing stores. My friend Josh leaves, and then so it's just John, my friend John, and this Czech girl Anna and I, and so we're standing there, and he was like, well, hey, look, there's like this lady, and she's kind of going around on her crutches, this older woman. He's like, we should go pray for her. We're like, well, at first he said like, we should pray for her. And we're like, oh yeah, that'd be great. And he was like, no, like let's go over and like talk to her and like pray for her. So we're like, okay. So we go over and we're like talking to her and saying, hey, we'd like to pray for you. And she's like, wow, really? Like, I thought like God had forgotten me. And so it's just really cool, like to just randomly on the street just pray for somebody. Like, how does that happen in the middle of a city? Like, I don't usually do that. And so we go about the day, and it ends up that Peter, he doesn't meet us. We call him, and he's met some girl from Serbia that he decides he's going to marry. And so who knows what they did that night, but we're still in contact with him, and it's just amazing. Like, okay, maybe he didn't come to Christ, but like, come on. Like 2.5 hours hearing the gospel, hearing God's word, like that has to be sitting in him somewhere. And I'm just excited, and like maybe hearing someday like, hey guys, I like remember when you were telling me about Christ way back then? Like, I got it. I'm there. I'm ready. Maybe it won't happen, but just on our part, just being able to be a part of that was just amazing. And so. The next morning, this is the third day that we're there, I get up and I'm going to meet my friend Milan, who many of you remember. Him and his sister lived across from me when I lived in Prague back a couple years ago. And I'd met Litka earlier this year. And so I go to hang out with Milan, and we're walking along. He's talking about life. And last time I saw him, he was kind of like really depressed. And so he's talking like, yeah, I'm trying to really make something of my life and just be super positive and like just really work hard. And so I was like, well, that's good. And we ended up going to this cafe, just like beautiful place. Looked over the Charles Bridge and the castle in Prague. And so we're sitting there, and he asked me like, hey, my sister said that you had a longboarding accident last year. Can you tell me about that? Hello, so you're probably wondering why I changed locations. I had to end the video earlier. So I wanted to continue the story that I was telling. So as I had said before, my friend Milan had asked me about longboarding, and I decided, oh hey, let's tell the whole thing instead of just that I fell. So I shared with him about what I'd been learning through that experience, and how God had been changing my heart through that. And he was like, man, you really believe this God thing, don't you? And I was like, yeah, I really do. And it's like, that's really strange. Now, many of you know, like the last time I talked to him, that he was an atheist. And that was probably over a year or two ago that I talked to him last. And so I was like, well, yeah, I do. I do believe in God, and could I share with you? And he was like, yeah, I'd be interested. So I share with him the gospel, and as I'm sharing, I talk about the difference between religion and following Christ, and we come to the end, and I challenge him, like, you want to make the decision in this, and And he sits there for a second, and he's like, yeah, I would. He's like, I really like what you're saying, and I do need it in my life. As I said before, he's wanting to challenge himself, so that was kind of an interesting thing. He's like, yeah, I feel like I should be challenging myself in this. And he said, I've had lots of experiences with many Christians who say they're Christians, but they don't really believe what they say. And he's like, I don't want to do that, and I don't know if I totally believe this yet. So I was like, yeah, that's fine. And he said, well, I'm surprised. I thought you would be like mad at me because of that. I said, no, I wouldn't be mad at you. It's your decision. It's, certainly I want to have you in heaven with me. I want you to be my brother and experience the freedom and the love that I've experienced in Christ. But I mean, it's your decision whether you want to do that or not. He's like, that's really interesting. I've never experienced that before. I was like, yeah, I hadn't either until I experienced God. and so after that, I said, well, hey, if you want to find out if this is something you really believe, you ought to read the Bible. Have you done that before? And he's like, yeah. You remember I told you, like, my grandmother gave me a Bible when I was younger, but it was, like, really, judgmental, and I didn't like it at all. And I said, well, I think it might have been the context that you were reading it in, because I don't see the Bible as judgmental. He was like, really? I said, yeah, I don't. And I said, how about you read it again? And I know from history that his grandmother's very religious and would always make them go to confessions. And I said, let's just, like, read it again, but read it in the context of just, I recommended a good book to you. So, like, if I recommend a good book to you, you would come at it with an open mind. You'd just be like, hey, I want to learn. Even as you're saying, challenge myself. Like, I want to challenge myself to learn something new through this. He was like, okay, that I could do that. So, well, do you have a Bible? And he goes, not anymore. So I said, okay, let's go to the store and let's buy one. So we walked into the square in Prague to the bookstore there, and we went and bought him a Slovak Bible. And I said, hey, read the book of John. That would be a good place for you to start. He was like, okay, that's good. And he's like, well, what if I don't understand it? I was like, you have my contact. Like, give me questions. Give me any comments you have on that. Let's talk through it. So we can even jump on Skype or whatever and talk. And I'd even like to go out there and visit. He's back home in the east of Slovakia this summer, so I'm hoping that I'll get a chance to go and visit him during that time. So we're walking along, and he's like, this is really interesting. I have never really experienced anything like this before, and I said, yeah, let's do that. Read John, and let's talk through it. And there's no pressure. I'm not pressuring you. Like, it's your decision. And he was like, yeah, I know. And I said, but one thing, also when you read, I'd like you to just say a couple words before. Say, God, show me yourself through this. He was like, that seems kind of strange. Like, he's not really even here. It's like, well, what do you lose? You say a couple things and waste a couple seconds of your life. If it's true, you're surprised. If it's not, then you know your answer. He's like, okay, we can do that. So, yeah, so those 2 days here in Prague were just spectacular. And it was really cool as that we had these conversations, and just the thought from conference of dying to self, and that through this process, as I died to self, there was many opportunities just in this, like, on vacation to share Christ. And I'm really just excited for what's to come, and to continue doing this in my life. I mean, if I had the opportunity every day like that to share the gospel, that's amazing. And I want to be looking for those opportunities and making those opportunities, and not just sitting back and waiting for the right time. And as you remember, as I shared about from longboarding, that was something that's kind of God's been putting on my mind and my heart, is this need that there's so many people dying, and where do I get to the point where I'm giving myself to the gospel enough that every day is an opportunity to share with someone. So be praying for Peter, and that I shared about, and Milan, and even this older woman, we don't even know her name, that we met in the streets, that they would just continue to experience God's love and grace for them. and and be praying for me that I continue to share that, and allow God to flow through me, to allow the Holy Spirit to flow through me in that area. So, hope you enjoyed this video blog, and that it wasn't too much of a adjustment for you to have the video and background and everything change halfway through it. So, God bless.